For the longest time, there was this man that would sit in his garage and watch me. He was an older man and he was very scrawny. He had patchy gray hair and a super gross beard. I never learned his name, so we'll call him Nick. He looked like a Nick to me. I moved into my classic suburban home before I was even born. I've been living here my whole life, and the first memory I have of Nick was when I was 10. He gave me a small two-finger wave as I walked back home after school. I had to see him every day since my bus stop was a few houses down and I walked like a block to get home. My mom said that he'd drop by after I was born, knocked on the door in the middle of the day, and rang the doorbell until somebody answered. My mom finally answered, my 1-year-old brother attached to her leg and newborn me in her arms. She said his face lit up when he saw me. He smiled brightly and asked to hold me. She obviously denied, 'cause who the heck comes to your house to hold your child when you don't even know them in the slightest? She said that he scowled at her before calmly walking back to sit in his garage and smoke a cigar. After my first encounter with Nick, I never stopped seeing him every day after school. Every morning before school and every time I took my dogs out for a walk. Every time I peeked out my window at 3 a.m. I swear this guy never slept. I told my brother how much it freaked me out and he said he was probably on house arrest and that was the only way that he could get out. We learned that wasn't true when he knocked on our door. Small background for this bit. My mom is very weak and she has an autoimmune disease and her legs and feet will go numb randomly. She's doing a lot better now, but this event happened when she was pretty bad. She insisted that she take the dogs out alone and didn't want to argue, so I sat in the living room. After about a minute, I hear a knock. I yell out that the door is unlocked, thinking that it's my mom. But there's a louder knock. I get up and go to the door. I open it and there he is, smiling at me. "Hey hon, your mom fell off the porch and you might want to help her." Nick stayed, giving me goosebumps. His voice was unreal. So raspy and it sounded like he was in the process of choking. He leaves very quickly and I hurry to help my mom off the grass, calling my younger brother to get the 2 dogs inside. I gave her the "I told you so" speech and she grumbled about it for weeks. My younger dog, a pit bull made of 98% muscle, got excited when she saw a bird. She pulled to get the bird and yanked my mom right off the porch. She was standing behind a pot and tripped over it on her way down, making the fall hurt a lot more. She had a black eye, and her legs were scratched up like crazy, and back, the pot of the flowers that she had tripped over was smashed, but she was okay otherwise. Flash forward to my 13th birthday and my mom's in the hospital, so my dad goes all out, letting me invite a ton of friends over for a sleepover, making us dinner and breakfast and just letting me have an amazing time. There's a park across from my suburb that I walk over to sometimes. I decided that I wanted to take my friends there to chill before their parents picked them up. The night before, we were looking out the window and giggling about the man. I know it's bad, but he was creepy and we were 13, so they knew he was weird. I told them to ignore him and if he talked to them, but I didn't take my own advice. "Hey, Rosie." He said it so quiet that I barely heard him. My name is Rose and Rosie is a nickname that my grandfather often used. I never told this guy my name, and neither did any of my family members. Hi. I replied and my friends all scowled at me, knowing that I messed up. "How's your mother?" "She's fine." I got to leave before I paused. "How do you know my name?" "You told me, remember?" "No, I don't, because it didn't happen, but I wanted to get away, so I agreed." "Oh, right," I chuckled. Me and my friends scurry off to the park. The next day, there's a box of chocolates sitting on the porch. A note with Rosie and Chicken Scratch writing on top of it. I pick it up and look over at the guy. He waves and I can see that his left hand has disappeared into his pants. Gross. I leave the box out there and I tell my dad. The next morning, me and my dad take our dogs out. No man. I figured that he gave up after he saw me reject his chocolates. A few weeks later, a large family moves into the house that I hadn't seen a trace of the man until yesterday. I'm 15 now and the woman who lives in the guy's house comes over yesterday. "Does a Rosie live here?" she asks. I had answered the door and my heart drops at the nickname from the stranger. "Yeah, why?" She hands me an envelope with my full name written on it. "The guy who lived in the house before us said to give Rosie this on her birthday." It's not Rosie's birthday. I was trying to pretend that I wasn't Rosie. "Oh well, I just took a guess. He didn't give us a date. Have a good day." My dad opened the envelope, wearing a mask because, and I quote, "What if he filled it with cocaine?" The note inside just said, "Love you," in his writing. Red ink, my favorite color. "So old guy that lived on the corner. I don't love you. I never have and I never will." Just an update. The man was arrested for some really bad things. Luckily, none of the photos were of me. Our local news went crazy about it, and last week, our suburb was flooded with news vans and stuff. I'm just glad that he's going to be in prison and not lurking around, looking at other girls. I was a pretty brave person when I was younger. Or maybe I had that sense of invincibility that comes with youth. I had survived some things. A stalker who pursued my sister and I for over a year and a half. 2 house fires. And growing up in a house that I swear to you was haunted. Not in that Disney way either. I'm talking like torture chambers in the basement and strange things going on. Anyway, I suppose looking back, that having been through all of that made me feel a little like either I was sort of invincible, or maybe I just assumed that I had gotten all of the bad stuff out of the way, and nothing else would happen. Whatever it was, I learned to know better. When I was 17, I didn't have a driver's license. In fact, I was 36 before I did. I walked most places, occasionally catching rides with friends and less occasionally hitchhiking. The night in question was one of those seldom seen occasions when I had decided to hitchhike, having worked late and being too exhausted to walk. Now, most of the time when I would hitch a ride, I wouldn't get in the car with a lone man. Only women or rarely men with a wife or girlfriend or kids in the car. This night though, cars were few and far between and it was cold. And really, if I'm being perfectly frank, when he pulled over, I took a good look and figured that I could take him if he tried anything. He was on the slender side and had a strange frailness to him, even though he looked healthy enough. I got into the car after we had agreed on a destination. We traded names and I warmed my fingers in front of the heating vent. He spoke quietly, asking a few questions along the lines of, was I a local and how did I like living here? He said that he had only been here for a couple of months but found it beautiful and hoped that he could find happiness here. That comment struck me as a little odd, but I brushed it off. It began to snow and the road quickly got slippery. So he slowed and kept his eyes straight in the windshield, driving silently. I was okay with that, as small talk was never my forte. About 10 minutes later, I noticed a car near the intersection that we were approaching. It seemed to be sliding, so he said, "Watch out." He immediately hit the gas, shooting through the intersection and burst out with, "Don't ever scream at me." Needless to say, I was taken aback. I said, "Look, this is close enough. Just pull over here and I'll get out." He didn't seem to hear me. Richard, did you hear me? I said you can pull over here and let me out." No response. He just stared straight ahead, driving faster now than he had been since it began to snow. To say that I was scared doesn't seem to cover the depth of the fear that began to arise in me. I didn't know if I should stay quiet or speak, but I was sure not going to yell after his outburst. After about a mile, he began to mumble under his breath. I couldn't quite make out what he was saying, but I assumed he was speaking to me. So I said, "Sorry, I couldn't hear you." He began to speak quietly and rapidly, saying things like, "You're always yelling at me. I've told you time and time again I do not appreciate being yelled at. But do you listen? No. Well, I'm done listening to you now. Do you hear that?" I was at a complete loss. I didn't know what to say in response or if I should say anything at all. I contemplated just jumping out of the car, but I nixed that idea when I realized that the door lock was missing. There was just a silver-lined hole where it should have been. I started to cry and debate with myself about causing an accident by grabbing the wheel and hoping for the best. At least I figured there was a chance I would survive that. When he suddenly looked at me for the first time since I had gotten into the car. He blinked several times, rapidly, and then slowed the car, pulling into a gas station. I waited to see if he would unlock the doors, not wanting to say anything to set him off again. After a minute or two, he quietly said, "I think I'd better let you out here," and he hit the button to open the locks. I wasn't about to hesitate. I jumped out of the car as if it were on fire. I was about to turn and walk into the gas station when he called my name. He looked so sad that I hesitated. He apologized and said that he was sorry if he had frightened me, that he never would have harmed me, and asked if I would be able to get home okay. I said that I would, and I closed the door. He began to pull out of the gas station lot, but stopped suddenly. He just sat there for a couple of moments, his head down. I froze, wondering what the heck was up with him, and was about to run into the station. But he opened his window and he yelled at me, waving something in his hand. My hat. I had left it on his seat. I warily approached his side of the car and he handed it to me, apologizing again. I didn't know what else to say, so I just said, "Thanks." I watched as he drove off, making sure that he was out of sight before moving on, so we wouldn't know which direction I was heading. I decided to go to a friend's instead of my home. As I walked, I went to put my hat back and out fell a piece of paper. Folded into the paper was a $100 bill. The paper said, "I'm sorry. Please take a cab and don't hitchhike anymore tonight." I didn't, in fact. It was the last time that I ever hitched a ride alone. It was about 2007 and I was struggling at the time. I had taken a sublet to get housing and it was in an area filled with bars and college students, so a lot of drunken fights and street harassment. I came home a little late one night and needed to take Lula out. She had one of those leashes that extend, so on her way around the block, I would usually let her stroll down this alley behind our building that she liked to investigate. As she's down the alley, I'm leaning against the building, smoking underneath a streetlight, not really paying much attention, when these two young guys come up. One stood straight in front of me, locked eyes, and wouldn't stop talking. It's like I was momentarily hypnotized. He kept asking if I wanted to party and where I lived. And then I realized that his buddy had slowly moved to my left, to the edge of my vision, and he could easily push me off balance into the alley. Every time I tried to look at his buddy, the smooth talker would move his head to keep my eyes locked on his. He was the distraction for the guy just out of my line of sight. I remember thinking that was pretty clever before it occurred to me that I was in trouble. And that's when Lula trotted over. Now Lula loved everyone. I would joke that she'd be useless in a home invasion, because she would be the most excited about making new friends. She was a shepherd hound pit mix that I had rescued as a puppy after she was found dumped on the side of a highway at about only 6 to 8 weeks old, probably the runt of the litter. And now, at 5 years old, she was maybe 60 pounds. Big enough to be a problem if she wanted to. But the problem was, usually, that she wouldn't get off your lap. This dog immediately put herself between me and these guys, peed on my feet, and started foaming at the mouth while snarling and lunging at them. They jumped back while I just looked at her, shocked. They asked if she was mean at all, and I lied that, yeah, she was. I had just rescued her from an abusive home, and she really hated men, when in reality she probably preferred them. They slowly walked away and Lula kept moving to put herself between me and them, until they were around the corner. And then she just looked at me like, that was fun. Lulu was with me for 10 more years after that. She passed peacefully in July 2017 at home in her own bed, being told that she was a good dog. One night, I think in April of last year, I was home alone and craving some potato chips. Fortunately enough, there is a gas station near my mom's house, only about a 5-minute walk away. I struggle with binge eating. I'm in way better control now though. So my parents tried to keep junk food out of the house to prevent me from binging on it. So what I would do was wait for them to go to my brother's hockey practice or a game. And then I would buy snacks from the gas station and hide the garbage in my room. Anyways, as I was walking to the store, it was quite dark outside. I think it was maybe around 8 p.m. Everything went normally. I found a bag of chips, paid for it, and started my walk back home. I live in a suburban neighborhood where the roads are generally not busy at all at this time of night. But to get to the gas station, I had to walk down a busy main road, so cars were a common sight at any time. When I turned onto my mom's street, it connects to the main road, I saw a black van with tinted windows slowly follow behind me. 30 seconds later, it pulled up to me and a man rolled down the window. It was dark out, so I couldn't pick out any of the man's features, but the tone of his voice made him sound like he was maybe in his 30s. I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was something close to this. "Hey there, my dog Chucky ran off and I'm looking for him. He's a golden retriever. Have you seen him?" "No, sorry," I responded. "That's alright. Say, do you want to hop in and help me look for him? It would be a big help." "I'm busy tonight," I lied. This was a very friendly neighborhood, and missing pets were a common occurrence, so I saw nothing wrong with what he was saying. The only reason why I said no was because I was honestly feeling pretty lazy and just wanted to eat some chips. To me, there was nothing off or wrong about the encounter. He thanked me anyways and drove off. I got home a few seconds later, locked the door behind me, and enjoyed some chips in my room. A few days later, I was telling my friends in art class about what had happened, just casually bringing it up. At the time, I still saw nothing wrong with what had happened, until suddenly my one friend who lives in my neighborhood, Kira, seemed to freeze up. "He drove a black van?" she asked. "Yes," I responded. I didn't know what she was getting at. "I saw him the other night and he told me the same thing, about the dog. Except when I said no, he tried to open the door and grab me." That was when the realization sank in. What would have happened if I had agreed to help him? What would my parents do if I had never come home? Kira was on the track team and I wasn't. What would have happened if he had tried to grab me or even chase after me? I was lucky that he didn't. I felt sick and I ended up having a bad rest of the art class. To this day, I never go on walks when it's dark out alone.